Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. Remember this game back in 2016 involving the Carolina Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday Night Football? This game was notable for one particular reason: the bizarre benching of MVP quarterback Cam Newton. 1 year after being on top of the football world and having an unbelievable season where he guided the Panthers to just their second Super Bowl in franchise history, he was suspended by head coach Ron Rivera because he did not wear a tie on the team's flight to Seattle. For a dress code violation, Newton got benched to start the game. The result was a disaster. Backup quarterback Derek Anderson quite literally threw an interception on the very first play of the game. The Seahawks scored, and the very next drive, Cam Newton was back out there in a game that would ultimately become a bloodbath, as the Seahawks won 40-7 in front of a national television audience. Odds are, you might remember that story pretty well. But what if I said that this was not even the strangest benching in the history of the Carolina Panthers that occurred because of a flight gone wrong? Because at least with Cam Newton and Ron Rivera, the logic implemented by the head coach made sense. You're going to play in the game, but you're going to be benched to start off because you broke the team rules. The logic employed by this man right here nearly 2 decades before that in 1998? Not so much. This man is the original coach of the Carolina Panthers, a man by the name of Dom Capers, and prior to a 1998 game against the Dallas Cowboys, he did something so ridiculous that deserves a deep dive today. And it's not so much that he benched or suspended the player in question, but rather the logic that he used to come to this decision that made no sense, and summed up just how disastrous the end of his stint with the Panthers truly was. Because with the Cowboys and Panthers playing each other this weekend, if you're watching at the time of this video, this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest and the strangest benching in the near 3-decade-long history of the Carolina Panthers franchise. Before I talk about the actual benching in question, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, how the game was going, and who this player was that got benched in the first place. It's October 11th, 1998. It's week 6 of the NFL season, and as we're in mid-October and have the season in full swing, we've got a game down at Texas Stadium in the NFC between the Carolina Panthers and the Dallas Cowboys. For the main subject of our story, the Panthers, this game is a must-win in all the worst ways, as time is quickly running out for them to salvage their season. Through 5 weeks, they have yet to win a football game, as they sit at 0-4, having been swept by the Falcons, including a 51-23 defeat in their last game, and having lost to the Saints and the Packers. We've seen an 0-4 team make the playoffs before, but never before had an 0-5 team made it. So if you lose this game to a very good Cowboys team that currently leads the division at 3-2 with the second best point differential in the conference, your season is pretty much dead in the water. About 20 months ago, you were 1 game away from the Super Bowl, and now you haven't even won a game yet. How the mighty have fallen. And unfortunately for the Panthers, this game, much like the other 4, did not pan out in their favor. Although at least it wasn't the absolute drubbing that the 51-23 defeat against the Falcons was the previous week. By the time the final whistle sounded in this game, the Cowboys were victorious, taking it 27-20. And more than anything else, the reason that they lost this game was not just their atrocious run game, but their historically bad run game. Because by the time this game ended, the Panthers had just 37 rushing yards on 21 carries, or 1.7 yards per carry. Not a single one of their 21 rushing attempts whether they came from quarterback Steve Berline or running backs Anthony Johnson or William Floyd, went for more than 4 yards. It was that bad. Just how bad was it? At the time, the Panthers had played, including the playoffs, 55 games in franchise history since their creation in 1995. Here's a look at their rushing total in all 55 of those games. And as you can see, this game against the Cowboys ranks second to last, only better than their 34-yard outing against the Broncos on November 9th, 1997. Although at least in that game, the Panthers averaged about 2.5 yards per carry, which isn't good at all, but it's a heck of a lot better than 1.7. It's tough to do a whole lot worse than this. Seriously, it's tough to do worse than 37 rushing yards with no runs longer than 4 yards and under 2 yards a carry, and it's why the Panthers lost this game. Which raises the obvious question: why was their running game so bad? Well, part of the reason was that they didn't have this man right here playing for them, Fred Lane. Lane was the team's starting running back for each of their first 4 games after a 1997 season where the undrafted man had 809 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns, including a 3-game stretch where he had back-to-back-to-back games of over 100 yards rushing, and one of the greatest games by any running back in Panthers history, when he had 147 yards on over 5 yards per carry and 3 touchdowns in a win against the Oakland Raiders. And while the 1998 season was by no means off to a great start, especially considering how he played at the end of 1997, he still had his moments, and had a game against the New Orleans Saints with over 5.5 yards per carry and 100 yards rushing. But despite starting the first 4 games of this season, and despite starting the last 11 games dating back to the second half of 1997, he did not play in this one. The reason? He was benched. The plan for the Panthers was simple. They were going to arrive at the airport in Charlotte for a 2:30 flight on Saturday, October 10th. The plane would land in Dallas a few hours later, the team would have dinner before meeting at 8 o'clock that night at the hotel, and then the team would sleep in the hotel before going to the stadium to play on Sunday. This is nothing too unusual or out of the ordinary for a team traveling. This is pretty standard procedure. However, for Fred Lane, he misread the itinerary. When he looked at the itinerary, he saw the 2:30 time, and thought that this was the time that the Panthers were supposed to arrive at the airport. Unfortunately for him, this was the time that the Panthers plane was taking off. And that's a pretty big difference. Getting to the airport at 2:30 versus the plane being in the air at 2:30 is like night and day. When Lane got to the airport and realized his mistake, he was running down the tarmac at the speed of sound with his bags in his hands. His teammates even saw him running down the tarmac and started chanting, "Freddie, Freddie, Freddie," as he chased the plane. But it was to no avail. The plane did not stop. Once you're about to take off, it is just not practical or feasible to abort the flight. So there Lane stood, right there on the tarmac as the plane had taken off and left him behind. Lane eventually booked a commercial flight to Dallas and got to Dallas in time for the team meeting. But by this point, the damage was done. You can't miss a team flight. You just can't. And because of this, Dom Capers made the decision to bench him for the start of the game against the Cowboys. Said Capers on why he did this? "We have rules, and they haven't changed since day one. And those rules apply to all players, no matter who it is. The players are responsible to be in a certain place at a certain time, and that includes getting to the plane on time." And obviously, that makes a ton of sense. Whether you're a starter or a backup, the rules apply to you. If you don't make it to the team flight, you're going to have your starting spot taken away from you. Added Capers, everybody on the team abides by those rules, and they've been the same since day one. They've never changed. It doesn't make any difference who it is, whether it's a starter or a backup or whatever. So that raises the ultimate question. Was Capers suspending Lane for the game as a result of this, or just benching him? Well, prepare yourselves for this, because this is where it gets absolutely ridiculous. Capers was just going to bench Lane for the start of the contest, have him lose his starting spot for the game, but then insert him back in there. However, in the middle of the game, he changed his mind and decided to bench him for the entire contest. The reason why? In his eyes, the Panthers offense and the Panthers rushing attack had a rhythm that he didn't want to mess up. Said Capers, "We scored on 2 of our first 4 possessions in the first half. We felt that we had some rhythm going. When we do have rhythm going, I'm always reluctant to change." Seriously, the reason that Fred Lane didn't enter the game is because Capers wanted to ride the hot hand at running back, and because the running game was too good to tinker with. Even though, may I remind you, this was a running game that averaged 1.7 yards per carry and had 37 yards on the day. Now look, I want to make something very clear before going any further. I have no problem whatsoever for benching Fred Lane for missing the team flight. If you want to suspend him for not showing up on time like he was supposed to, and for violating team rules, that is entirely your prerogative. Most coaches would do the same, where if a player misses the team flight, they're not playing the game. So I'm in no way whatsoever saying that Capers was in the wrong here for not playing Lane. And this is especially true when you realize that if there was an award for showing the least amount of remorse possible for a situation like this, Lane would win that hands down. Like, it's actually comical how little Lane cared about this and what he did wrong. When Lane was asked after the game if he felt bad about the situation, you would think that he would say something like, "I hate that I let my teammates down, and it's my responsibility, and I won't be making that mistake again. I broke the rule and I deserve to be punished, and it stinks that I couldn't be there for my teammates today when they needed me." But nope. He said, when asked about if he felt bad, no. For what? Everybody misses a plane sometimes. He then added, "Everybody misses planes. I'm not the first one. I won't be the last one." And when asked about whether it was hard to watch the game without being out there on the field, he said, no, it was okay. I'm honestly impressed with how little he cared. It's like he chose the worst possible answers for every single question. You have to physically try to have answers that bad and to care that little. That is an impressive level of apathy and not getting it. So let's just get that out of the way right now. Capers was 100% in the right to bench him for missing the team flight, especially considering the lack of remorse afterwards. Having said that, while the initial benching was fine, you said that your plan was to get him into the game afterwards. But you didn't because you were in a rhythm? I'm sorry, what? What rhythm? Your definition of being in rhythm is very different than the normal definition of being in rhythm. Heck, even Iowa's offensive coordinator is looking at you like you have 3 heads. You had 37 rushing yards. That was the second lowest total in franchise history at the time. You averaged less than 2 yards a carry, 1.7 to be exact. If you had 5 downs to get a first down instead of the usual 4, and you did nothing but run the ball, you would still be short of the sticks. Your longest run of the day was 4 yards. That is actually impressive to have 21 runs in a game and not have any of them go for more than 4 yards. Usually, no matter how bad you might be at running the ball on this day, you at least get one by sheer chance via a broken tackle or winning a block. You had no rhythm. You had no rhythm at all. That's like me saying I decided to use my driver on every single hole because I had a good rhythm with it. Meanwhile, all of my drives were shanks that went out of bounds. That's like me saying that instead of driving to the hoop, I decided to pull up from a 3 on every possession and just hang out by the arc because I had a good rhythm. Meanwhile, I didn't hit a single 3, and all of my shots were air balls. And yes, you did score twice on your first 4 drives. You got a touchdown and a field goal. I can't deny that. But this is a classic case of correlation not equaling causation, because you did that in spite of your run game, not because of it. On the first 4 drives of the game, you ran the ball 9 times. On those 9 carries, not once did you get more than 4 yards. On those 9 carries, you amassed 21 yards, so 2.3 yards per carry, which is abysmal in every sense of the word. You got 10 points on those drives because Steve Berline was wheeling and dealing, and because Rocket Ismail was a human cheat code that the Cowboys had no answers for. It was not because of your run game. It's like if you win a baseball game and decide to keep the lineup exactly the same for the next game because you had a good thing going. Meanwhile, your shortstop went 0 for 6 with 6 strikeouts and 3 errors. Yes, you won the game, but your shortstop was not the reason for it at all. And the same thing applies here. Your running game was in no way whatsoever the reason that you scored points on those 4 drives. In fact, your running game might be the reason you didn't score more points. And you decided not to play Fred Lane because you had too good of a rhythm to mess up? Just because you got points? So which one is it, Dom? Seriously, which one is it? Did you bench him because of the plane ride, or did you bench him because of performance reasons? Because if you said from the start, we have a rule that if you don't make the team plane, you don't play, and I have to set standards for everyone, and the rules apply to all people, that's fine. And this is a non-story. Trust me, I agree with you if you do that. But by saying Lane has to be punished for what he did, but I thought about putting him in, but opted against it because we were moving the ball well, and we're getting some good things going with the ground game, so why mess up a winning formula? You just elevated this to one of the dumbest things I've ever seen a coach do when it comes to managing a roster during a game. It takes skill to look like the incompetent one for suspending a player for breaking team rules, especially one as big as missing a plane. But you found a way, with your absolutely backwards and insane logic. Oh man, did you find a way. It's moments like that moment in the game between these two teams behind me right here that not only sum up just how disastrous Carolina's 1998 season was, where they went a franchise worst 4-12 at the time, but that summed up why Dom Capers was let go at the end of the season after 4 seasons as the head coach of the team. It just wasn't working out by the end, and this was a prime example of that, because the logic here made no sense whatsoever. As for Fred Lane, this would not be the last time he got suspended in 1998 by Capers for violating a team rule, although that was in a completely separate incident, and that's a story for another video. I have a headache trying to follow the logic by Dom Capers here. Benching a player for missing the team flight and for violating the team rules is one thing. I have no problem with that. Heck, to suspend him for doing that, I'd have no problem with that either. If Capers just flat out said, Lane missed the team flight, and because of this, he was suspended for this game due to team policy, fine. But to bench him with the intention of inserting him back in later on, but opting not to do that because you wanted to ride the hot hand, of which there was none, unless it was opposite day and your definition of hot was really cold? Yeah, that didn't make a whole lot of sense back then, and still doesn't a quarter century later. Because on this day in 1998, for some reason, when it came to Fred Lane, Dom Capers had no idea which lane he wanted to be in. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.